So our tagline is healing is our superpower. And so it's really helping others in a way. And so I mean, the Lord just continues to be like, you think you're just kind of, here. And now I'm like, man, like I'm in it, I'm like, yes, I know it'll outgrow me very quickly, and I will have to bring somebody that's, there, but I will always be a champion for it because it has touched so many parts of my life.
We have a really inspirational conversation for you today with our special guest, Christina Mangino. You're going to hear about a career that she has been led into that she never planned on going into, but it totally captures her essence of what she loves to do, temperament tests and personality tests and people's emotions and feelings. All of those things, how they relate to a family's or a personal individual's legacy. And it's fascinating. And I love that this is her career. She's been written about in books and articles and has her own company that you're going to hear about. So stay tuned to this episode of the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. Welcome to today's episode of the Generous Girl podcast. Today, I am joined by Christina Mangino. And I know you're going to enjoy listening to her story. She has guided many successful entrepreneurs in managing and transitioning their wealth to the next generation over the past 2 decades. And she's also really learned in that process a fundamental truth, and that is that if we sacrifice our relationships for riches, both will end up empty. And she has personal experience as well as tons of experience in her own job. And she fulfills a really unique niche in the marketplace and how she works with these families. So I would love for you to meet Christina. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, it is fabulous to have you here. And I feel like the last time we were together, we were taking a walk on the beach barefoot. And it was hot and sunny, and now we're in winter. the relative definition of winter in Southern California or Nevada.
Now we have to wear a scarf.
I know, exactly. Well, it's fabulous to have you here. And I would love to just start with the question of, how did you first end up having a love for generosity or a love for giving?
I would say my love for generosity really started, I did a leadership class in my early 20s. And in that class, we were challenged to raise $2,500 in 7 days, which back then was like what? And really through that journey, it was so fun. One, realizing how many people were just wanting to give and wanting to be part of something and wanting to help something and like excited. So that was really fun. And then also I went on a mission trip to Haiti where they asked, hey, even if you can afford to pay for the trip yourself, we really, really highly encourage you to not use any of your own money and raise the money.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And through that was also similar. But I also realized how many people said, I've always wanted to go on a mission trip, but I've got the 3 little ones, or I have this. And so it was like almost like they vicariously wanted to go on my trip with me. And so they loved being part of the journey because they got the reports and doing that. And so those 2 experiences are definitely ones that I remember back of just realizing how many people really want to give and support and help others and be part of something.
Yes, part of something bigger than themselves. And I really agree with you on that. Years ago out of college, I joined crew staff to get the training to then go back into the corporate world and had to raise my own support. And I thought all the people I knew in my network or my family knew, oh, that'll be my support team. But what happened was I would meet with people and they'd say, oh, I love what you're doing, but I'm already maxed with, who I'm giving to, but I'd love for you to meet my brother or my sister. And then you meet these other people you never knew. But in the end, they're so passionate and generous, and they're the people that God has called to be a part of your team. And they so felt like it was a blessing to give and be a part of something, because they were not going to move to Texas and work with Josh McDowell. That was going to be my job. But in their worlds, they could support what I was doing. And just like you said, be a part of something bigger. So that's exciting. And then I would love for you to explain to the listener how, I alluded to it in the intro, but I really think the niche that you're in with how you support these 35 families is really, really unique. And I know you have personal experience, personal and professional experience that has led you to be doing the role that you're doing now. But why don't we back it up and talk about your personal experience when you were 33 and how everything changed for you?
Yeah, so I started really young, got into financial advising, became a certified financial planner within a few years, and was a traditional financial planner, which, I was really good at. I loved people, I love helping people. And about, gosh, I don't know how many years, 10 years in, whatever it was, my family asked me to help our family, become our family trustee. And it was two sets of grandparents, my parents, my brother, and I. And so at the beginning, it was like, sure, this is so fun. This is the industry I'm in. This is great. And so really the beginning part of that was, we just had shared real estate and we were doing different things together and everything was kumbaya. And about 5 years in, some family members of mine, I had a grandmother dealing with cancer at the time, my other grandmother going into hospice, and my father's got pulmonary fibrosis. And within a couple of years was then on oxygen full time. So now what seemingly everybody's life now was shifting a different direction. So everybody's looking at different priorities. So now you've got my brother and I on one spectrum who were younger, wanting to take more risk and do things. And now you have a different generation. And my dad's thinking of my mom, who's 9 years younger, and his own, personal journey, health wise. And I just remember there was this moment where my dad and we just kept like relationally struggling. And I'm turning myself into a pretzel thinking, do I need to explain it in a picture graph? Do I need to get him a word printout? Do I need to visually? And so I'm trying to give him the information. But really what it came down to, it wasn't a different matter of information. It's just he was on oxygen full time. His brain's not getting the same thinking capacity that he used to have. And I was just really frustrated and thinking like, let's just dismantle it all. Let's, there's no amount of trinkets in the world that matter because this is daddy. This is my hero. And I just remember thinking, if I am somebody with a financial planning background, legal and technical background, I've always been one that would geek out on personality profiles and love languages and just really from a communication and a personal development side. And I'm like, if I have all these tools in my toolbox and I want to like, just say like, screw it and walk away, no wonder statistically that's what's happening with families. And for most people know the statistics, wealth passed between generations, 70% is gone by the first generation, 90% is gone by the third generation, but 85% of the time it's because of trust and unity and communication, not because of anything legal, technical in the planning. And so I remember thinking like, wow, so what's the answer? If we're frustrated. And so I went looking for resources and I really couldn't find any other than like doing a mission, vision, values, and doing that. And so, as the Lord would have it, I went to a conference and I met a couple who was doing a relational process with families. And it had nothing to do with their investments, nothing to do with creating the trust. It was simply a process for families to get to know each other, know each other's love languages, their personality styles, know what uniquely makes them who they are, but also learning safe conversations, how to have critical conversations, how to, giving them a space to process the relational impact of our major financial decisions. And right then and there, I was like, okay, Lord, thank you. This is it. And so I actually got a friend of mine who was a financial planner as well. And I asked her to come in and start doing some of these with our family. And it was completely transformative because it gave everybody a space and it allowed me to be the daughter and the granddaughter and not be the financial planner, the trustee, and the one that everybody's looking for to kind of solve it and find the solution. So really through that journey is where the Lord just placed on my heart and said, hey, like, there's a lot of great financial planners out there. Yes, you're good at it, but there's not people walking this journey. And he's uniquely built me for that. And a lot of the experiences through my own family, but just even in, like I said, I love to always geek out in personality profiles and love languages. And I've always gravitated toward the relational side with my clients, helping them. And so really through that journey, I just realized like, wow, this is what's this is what's missing in the families and those statistics is no one's giving them a process how to relationally build the family. Because at a foundational level, we loved each other. Like, I mean, we had dinners together. We're an Italian family.
Sure.
We go to sport, so it wasn't that we weren't connected and spending time together and there wasn't love there. It was that now we're in a new era with new, a journey. Like, like for me, like walking the journey with my dad and his pulmonary fibrosis, and then he had a lung transplant and he was, this poster child for lung transplants and was phenomenal. He had 2 great, amazing years and then gets pancreatic cancer. And then walked that,
sorry.
you know what I mean? And so there's just a lot of journeys in that where it's like that part, there's no manual. There's no trust to create. There's no, you know what I mean? Like all of that was done, but how do you relationally walk together, but also still have to deal with the financial, things that you're doing together and row the boat together, but also what's it going to look like when, and that's one really has been eye-opening is like when you do have a family member, it shifts the dynamic. So, my dad was, he's a golden retriever, very supportive peacemaker. And now it's like, okay, without him there, it's like, it's a noticeably different at, holidays in there. And so it's like, you're always like, so there's just so many layers to life and relationships. And so to me, that has been for me, just really, really, just a labor of my heart, to help other families, because when other families get it, like they get it and they share it with others. And so it's like, you don't know what you don't know until you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, you know what I mean? They start to really love each other in the love languages. And like, hey, if they're quality time family, they start doing more quality time stuff together or, and so really that's been, I feel like it's the secret sauce of what multi-generational families, that 1 in 10 family that becomes multi-generational, it's because they're getting the relational piece right and being able to not only have the good parts of relationships, but also being able to have the critical conversations and safe conversations and be able to walk through the valleys together with grace. In that, because, nobody sets out to have a legacy of a disconnected family.
Right. Well, I recently heard Gabe and Rebecca Lyons. They spoke at an NCF event, Impact 2024, that we held in Arizona this past in October last year. And they were talking about, it's like 28% of evangelical families right now have been impacted by this cancel culture that's out there. And people on TikTok or Facebook, Instagram, therapists, psychologists, experts are saying, well, if you don't like what you are hearing or you have a different opinion, then it's okay to break the communication in the family and literally stop talking to your sibling or your parent. And they were just saying in this talk that it's never been as high as it is today. And, so sad because, of course, like someone can easily just go, okay, that's it. I disagree and I'm just going to break communication. It's way, way harder to work it out and, maybe even agree to disagree, but your family or your friends, and let's not ruin the relationship over a disagreement. Sometimes, it can be something very, very minor that becomes something very, very major. So I love that you're called to this space. One time I met this family that, has 3 siblings and manage a very, very large empire in the United States. And they had a psychologist who was available kind of on retainer for their family to work out issues and, call out issues or strategically say, what about this? And so, I mean, you're addressing the emotional side of things and with finances and legacy, and so important. And how do you feel like when you said they finally get it and they share with others, what do you think it is that they're sharing?
I mean, it's twofold. One's kind of the fun side, I always say. So for me, on the personality profile, we use Lion, Otter, Golden Retriever, Beaver.
I love that. I used to teach on that.
Did you?
Yes, at Saddleback.
So the Lion is like the controller and other personality profiles. The Otter is the promoter. The Golden Retriever is the supporter, and the Beaver is the analyzer. So for me, I am 100 Lion and 100 Otter, both. And so like, even for me, it's like, I always joke that it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have so much fun, but we're doing it this way. This is how we're doing it. And I'm, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's like, even learning that and of myself, well, now it becomes this kind of fun joking with families where it's kind of like, hey, put your lion away.
Yes.
Let's bring your otter out. And, you know, hey, you know, your golden retriever's a little, you know what I mean? So it kind of gives families this a little bit of a playfulness. Because, you know, usually there is kind of like, you know, there's the lion in the family. And then if one of the sons
there's the
is
oldest
not a
child.
lion, yeah. And if they're not the lion and they're more of a golden retriever, it's like now they have more of an understanding of, oh, they are more supportive and conflict avoidant. But there's also so many strengths in that we don't, because they're different. And so it's it's celebrating the differences. And so it makes it a little bit fun to do that. But also from a love language standpoint, we usually only think about it in a romantic love relationship. But in reality, it's like, I remember, you know, one time when they were asking, like, what's one of my favorite childhood memories? And for me, it's like my grandparents had this place in Palm Desert, California, on a golf course with, you know, pools and everything. And it was literally just my dad throwing me in the pool. And we're always doing the like, one more. And like, and as we unpack that, he's like, quality time, you know? And so like, we realize like how much of my positive memories are around quality time.
Right.
And so you start to realize that, and then it's like, you know, you start to then go, oh, this is why we're having this little bit of a friction, because if you have a family member that's not quality time, so for them being on their phone and talking to you at the same time, that's just, that it doesn't feel work. Disconnected. But for some, it's quality time. It's like, you know, it's actually my grandmother, my 91-year-old grandmother, is the worst at it, where she's like, I miss you. And then we're together and she's on her phone. I'm like, Grandma.
That's so funny.
But you start to just like, you know, it gives you a way to playfully celebrate the unique differences within each other, but also then the things that you are alike. And so if you are, you know, 6 out of 7 of you are quality time, well, now you get to pour more gas on that to be able to have more fruit from that. And so it's just like in a relationship when it's like there's deposits and withdrawals. And so, you know, most of us, it's like, okay, we know the withdrawals because it takes, I can't remember statistically, but it's like 7 or 10 deposits to overcome a withdrawal. I can't remember the exact statistics, but it's a big difference. And so are we in everyday relationships thinking about the deposits versus withdrawals? And I know even for me with family, we take them for granted the most. They're the ones that's so easy because we know they'll be there and doing that. And so are we actually intentionally putting deposits into the important relationships in our life? Or are we only expecting the withdrawals because they're family and we're doing that? And so one, I think that, yeah, utilizing it gives them, you know, a fun way to actually utilize that. And so like people kind of hear some of that language and do that. But like also when they're sharing it, they're sharing about, wait a minute, because we're now having this ability to connect differently, have critical conversations. Well, to me, then the Lord just shows up to have things that they've been working on just start to come to fruition. And so whether it's in some of the giving things that they've wanted to do with generosity, whether it's actually they wanted to, you know, utilize a family giving statement or a family policy statement of who gets to utilize the vacation home, or, you know what I mean? So there's all these different nuances that now it gives them the ability to do it. And so they're sharing with others, like, now we were able to just do it. It wasn't all of this like struggle to get everybody to the table to have these conversations to move initiatives forward that were important to them.
Well, I had a guest on my podcast named Courtney Markley, and she's in the Midwest, and she also works on the more emotional side of finances and legacy. But I really feel like it could be an emerging field because it's so critical. I mean, whether somebody has the millions or billions or they're an ordinary American family, it's still vitally, vitally important. And money is something that sometimes we just don't want to talk about or don't feel comfortable, or especially if, you know, somebody has cancer and it's the important time to for sure talk about it before they pass away. And some people can, some people can't. And yet those conversations help future generations so much when you have the tools, you're equipped to have those sometimes, very, very difficult conversations. And one other thing you reminded me of with the lion, beaver, golden retriever, and otter was what we would do is we had like hundreds of women in this Tuesday Bible study at Saddleback Church, and we would have them take their primary animal that they were, if you were a lion as the top one, then you'd stand in the right corner of the room and the beavers would be in this room. And then we'd have them in 4 quadrants. And we would ask them, okay, like you're going to plan a vacation. What does that look like? And of course the otters would just be like, I just landed in Maui and I don't know what we're going to do. And, the beavers have planned it for 3 years. And we know from 8
and they know every temperature, they know the temperature of every day.
Yes. And so it just was really fun to watch the dynamics. And then sometimes to mix people up, put the beavers, with the golden retrievers. And really, really great. I'm like you in terms of being a big fan of the Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finder, and then this exercise as well. So with your 35 families, do you just have them on kind of like a rotation during the year where you're making sure that you're covering certain things? And, this family, I haven't gone through the lion, beaver, otter, and this one, we're going to focus on this year. And you just kind of throughout the year, you're just taking them on that journey?
Yeah, so the process is a process. So it's very structured. So the first year, everybody's going through the same process. And so at the beginning, we're laying the foundational tools. We're going through those. Then we're laying out the personality profiles, the love languages. We're teaching them safe conversations. But also in the middle of that, it's like leaving room for what needs to be processed in the moment. Because sometimes there's something very relevant and maybe one of the children are getting married and there's a difference in X, Y, or Z. And sometimes it's like, we need to talk about this right now. So we always also leave room to talk about, things that are in the moment. But for the most part, it's a very structured process, but we have flexibility within the structure. So when there's topics that need to actually be discussed in that moment, and everybody's like, while the process is very structured for everybody. And so it's, 1 day a month that we're going through. And just to clarify, it's actually not 35 families is actually on the other side, some of my financial planning. Those are the families I'm still like wearing the financial planning hat on.
Got it.
But with the relational side, I couldn't actually walk with 35 families at once energetically.
That's a lot. I was wondering about that. Yes.
Yeah. So that one looks more like, I basically will walk with 10 max.
Like a handful.
So it's, 10 max, because some of them are not going through the full year yet. Where we'll start with some onboarding, some family retreats, some family meetings, where we're kind of gradually, because the full process, it is a commitment for families because we're doing 1 to 2 full days a month. And it is, it is a time commitment, but the reward is so fruitful that once they jump in, like everybody's in. But sometimes like you have to warm up to go, all the way in. But yeah, so all the process, for the most part, once they're going through the full process, they're meeting once a month together. And we're facilitating once a month together with them, out there. And then, we'll have, a family meeting. Sometimes they'll ask us to help facilitate a board meeting if there's a lot of important topics, and doing things. So yeah, so, while it's very structured, there's also flexibility for where the family's at in the moment.
So I'd love to talk about this other facet of yours of starting a nonprofit. And I know you went through significant pain and suffering through a back injury, but yet how that led you to start this nonprofit that you probably would not have started. So can you share that story with us? Because we always talk about how we've overcome adversity and all of us have the different challenges and hard things in our lives. So I know that's quite a story for you.
Yes. If you would have ever asked me, I would definitely said, no, I'm definitely never not going to start and run a nonprofit ever. But so 2017, I got in a car accident and herniated my L5S1 in my back. And I was scheduled for a discotomy. And randomly, I had talked to 2 really good friends of mine separately in that same week who I wasn't normally talking to consistently. And they had started a alternative cancer hospital in Tijuana, Mexico. And so they said to me, both are like, push your surgery off and come down. I'm like, what? you want me to tell my family I'm going to push surgery off, come to a cancer hospital in Tijuana, Mexico, when I've been working in a lawn chair in my living room for 2 months? And they're like, yes. And at that time, when we talk about adversity, I mean, I went from CrossFitting 5 days a week, and which also for me, after the downturn in 2008, when a lot of that stress and I put on weight, was how I actually really regained my health was from CrossFit. So I was a CrossFit junkie, loved it. I'm an extrovert, love variety. But also I was an adrenaline junkie, loved snowboarding, loved jumping off of, all these things. So now all of a sudden I went from all of the things that for me found joy to I couldn't do any of those, to the point where I couldn't even, I'm literally working out of a lawn chair in my living room and only leaving the house when I had to meet with clients. So doing the bare minimum. So I also got my first glimpse of what it was like to really, not be, as an extrovert, that's like the worst thing in the world, to not be able to have any social time and do things with people. And so, so it was definitely a morning of the how I was living life in the moment and having to redefine. But at the same time, so they talked me into coming down, and I went down for 2 weeks. And I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with all the cancer patients and did everything but the cancer regimen. So I actually did the Gerson diet for 2 weeks. I did hyperbaric chambers, PEMF therapy. I did ozone injections into the facet joints in my back. So within 48 hours of my first ozone injection, I had no sciatica pain whatsoever, and it's never come back. So for me to say grateful, and I had to go back down, we did like 5 rounds. So I kept going back down, and every time I'd go down, I'm, of course, cooking dinner for them, and we're sitting around a table, and I'm so grateful, and I'm falling in love with the cancer patients who just, it was such a place of healing when you're watching somebody come in and just you can physically see that their body is breaking down. And within 2 weeks, they have color back. They're walking again. And you're just watching this healing unfold in front of your eyes. And for me, it was the first really outside to the alternative medicine world at this point. So I fell in love with the hospital. And so I just kept going down, just because you're listening to, I specifically remember just patients thanking their cancer because it restored their relationships, because it opened their eyes to what was important. And you're like, okay, what do I have to complain about, for one? You know what I mean? So one, it was just a really special place. But as we sat around those dinners, at the time, 95% of the patients that would call wanting to go down there for treatment couldn't afford to get there, or couldn't afford to take 3 weeks off of work to get there. So we would always just they just have the biggest hearts. And so, it was always just, how do we help those who can't get here? And so it was always this dream to financially be able to support those get there. And at the time it was like, oh, okay, who's going to do it? We're all, having our own businesses, and they're trying to cure cancer and doing that. And then fast forward a little bit later, they now started doing stem cells. They're now one of the, top stem cell clinics in the world. And now they're on the orthopedic side. And so I was their second disc injection patient. I call myself guinea pig number 2. So, the owner actually tried to get me to be the first one to go. And I was like, nope, you can have that honor. As soon as you do it, I'll do it. So I also got stem cells injected into my disc. So for me, out of gratefulness, now they're starting to do all this great orthopedic injuries and doing that. So fast forward to 2022, as my dad is now in the thick of his cancer journey. So after he had a lung transplant in 2020, he then got pancreatic cancer. And that fight was unique, because here I am with these friends that have this renowned hospital, but my dad was immune compromised. And everything they did was immune building. He had to risk rejecting his lung. So that had its own journey in and of itself. And during this journey, I thought I was just going to help them from a consultant standpoint. So they're like, hey, we now have patients who are funding each other. We've got, cancer patients who are deemed terminal getting 5 extra years, and they want to leave us money. And we don't know how to, and so I was like, could we use a donor advised fund, and then I was like, no, we still need the 5, and so long story short is I was just like, okay, let me help you get it there, and then we'll hire a real person to actually run it. And during that journey, my 2 months after we launched, I lost my dad to his journey. And, in that, now realizing, and the Lord just, he couldn't make it any more clearer, because every time I was joking of like, yeah, I'm just helping, and then he like would bring somebody else. And one of the very first instances of that is we had a 9/11 first responder who needed some financial support to get down and contacted us. And he had pulmonary fibrosis. So he had the disease my father had, and he came down a few months later, got stem cells, and now he's over a year now, and his scans show no remnants. He has like a couple little dots on his scans, and he's like, hey, one more round and I'm pretty sure that I'm curing this. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I get chills every time I still think of it, of like, wait a minute, you're going to tell me that I could potentially help other families not go through the journey my family went through with my dad, and watching him go on oxygen, watching him get a lung transplant. I mean, going through that journey. And so that was the first one where I was like, okay, Lord. And then just for me, it's been such a beautiful healing journey, because I get to talk about my daddy almost every day. I'm talking about his cancer journey, his pulmonary fibrosis. My grandma's had stage 4 cancer, my back, I also
your own story, right?
Partially tore an ACL and healed that in 2.5 months without surgery, and, through it. And so I really realized, so the Lord just continues to just really bring these amazing partners that are helping us on the journey, but also it was a healing journey in of itself. And so while I was usually on the donor side, it's been a really unique journey. I was actually just sharing with somebody recently that, I used to be the one of like, what are they spending their admin dollars on? What percentage is going to admin? And now I'm the one that's having to do it. I'm like, how are they doing that? How are you running on 10%? Because the donors you're going after, they're not meeting at Wiener Schnitzel's. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you've got to actually have events to, to cultivate those donors and do that. And so now I'm having this whole like new view, and you need people, and you need someone to run the social media.
Staff,
and like,
right.
And in a normal business, I just hire for it. Now I have to actually think about, the dollars, and, so it's been a really unique journey, not just in me having a different perspective of what nonprofits truly take to run and build and grow. But also it's been a unique journey of like, now it's no longer me just helping and saying, hey, here's some money to help. Now it's where the Lord said, no, you're taking your time, treasure, and your talents. But really this journey is like, I don't know, it's just been so much more fruitful from a generosity perspective. Because for me, it's like, it culminates like all these journeys I've gone through with my dad. And so while of course, yes, would I love to have my dad here and wish stem cells were there when he was starting his journey? Yes. But if it wasn't for my dad's journey, I wouldn't have this unique perspective to really, so our tagline is healing is our superpower. And so it's really helping others in a way. And so I mean, the Lord just continues to be like, you think you're just kind of, here. And now I'm like, man, like I'm in it, I'm like, yes, I know it'll outgrow me very quickly, and I will have to bring somebody that's, there, but I will always be a champion for it, because it has touched so many parts of my life.
That's so beautiful, Christina. And, when I think of this podcast and the different pillars, for sure, the two that we're emphasizing on this episode are faith and family. And I love how you've taken the highs and the lows and been flexible and open for the Lord's leading, to make you a more generous person, not only with your resources, but with your time, with your talent. And then how all of that understanding and learning, you're applying that to these families that you're working with, and they're becoming more generous families in all those regards as well. So what would you say, in kind of as we wrap up, and we'll get to your favorite book and Bible verse and bargain, what would you say to the woman listening? Here we are in the early part of 2025, and she's looking at her life. She's looking at her journey. She's looking maybe at her career, her calling. And like yours at this stage, just feels like it's so beautifully dovetailed. But what would you say if for her, it's not that way? And it's kind of like, I don't know which way I'm going, Lord. And this is happening and it won't fit together. Any advice or encouragement you would give to that woman? Or maybe even like, because you love temperament tests so much, is there a test you'd recommend to help her better understand herself? Any final parting words we'd love to hear?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of layers in that. I mean, and what I would say, I mean, just to be fully transparent and vulnerable for myself, like my life rate is not what I thought it would be. I went into financial planning to be able to stay at home with my children and raise a family. And I am still not married without children. And it's been a desire of my heart. That's been a huge walk with the Lord in doing that. And so on one hand, it's like, I have also like there's all these fun things that the Lord is utilizing me as a vessel to do that are amazing. And also it doesn't mean it's exactly what way I thought my life would look, and so there is still a piece of that, journey with the Lord that's like, okay, Lord, like, and having that. So one, I think it always goes back to surrender. I mean, it's surrendering that like, if we really are having faith, that I just keep saying, okay, Lord, if this is your journey, it doesn't mean I don't still have the desire of my heart to, have a family and be in love and have that peace, but also it's an end. It's not one or the other. But so I would say one, it's like, the Lord may not have us look exactly the way we planned out our life, but then there's so many of these, rich part of the journey that like, it does light me up when I help a family and I see them just become more connected and thriving and they're excited and want to tackle conversations together and have it together, like in doing that. And, for me, like, did I ever think that I would be a champion for veterans? I mean, like, on the stem cell side, we're helping veterans heal their pain from physical injury. No, but man, like, wow, like every time it's always the wife that I have the conversation with. She's like, I don't think you understand. I had to push him out of bed. Like he couldn't walk the dogs. Like, you know what I mean? And just like, I have my husband back. He's able to play with the kids. He's able to throw the kids in the air again. Like, and so you're hearing all of these and I'm like, wow, like, thank you, Lord. Thank you Lord, for allowing me to say yes and doing that. So one, I would just say the encouragement is, while it might not look the way we expected, it's like he's going to bring so many, joys and blessings when we're just faithful, but it's never without hardship because there's still a lot of things with my family and walking through and with my dad. And, like it's like everything. It's like, we got to find joy in the journey, which from personality profiles, I like the destination. I want to know where we're going, what's going on, and so that's like, always a part of the heart of like, finding joy in the journey, regardless if it's the destination we expected. So one, I would just say is like, just encouraging to like surrender to the journey and what it looks like versus being focused on the destination we think it needs to be. I would say for one, from like a tool standpoint, I think the more that we know ourselves and we really know who we are. And so whether that's an Enneagram, whether it's a Myers-Briggs, love languages, like, I think so many of that of like, when we know ourselves, it really allows us to also know like maybe what is in the way from what we want, because sometimes it's just not having an awareness of a wound we haven't healed, something we haven't, been willing to see and restore. And it's, it's always a journey. Like everybody thinks you like start like learning about yourself and you're like, I've arrived. And it's like, no, it's a forever journey.
Sure.
Because you get to a new layer. And so, so I would think the more that you get to know yourself and become aware. And I would also say having people in your life that you're allowing to speak into your blind spots, I think is also very, very important, because sometimes, it might not be something you can see. The Lord brings other people in your life to allow you see things that you can't see.
Very, very well said. And I know before the episode started, before we started the recording, you talked about a group that you're in, and you found a gal that leads this group, and she's speaking into your life, challenging you with books that you're reading, other people that are in the group. And unfortunately, like those things don't often just get dropped in our lap, but we have to intentionally seek those out. And when we know like there's an area that I really want to grow in my life in 2025, then I just want to encourage everybody, pray about that. And honestly, God will bring the people your way, or the resources your way, or the books your way, so that you can continue growing on that journey that he has for you. And I do think, Christina, when you were talking, you gave me the title of this podcast, and I think it'll be Finding Joy in the Journey. I like that. So, okay, current book that you're reading, favorite Bible verse.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead.
Well, favorite book versus current book. I would say my favorite book is definitely Gospel.
Okay, either one.
Hands down. But currently, a surprising book that I'm reading that I didn't choose to read, it's actually from the fellowship group I mentioned, and it's actually a book called Codependent No More. When originally they assigned it, I'm like, everybody in my life says I am like over independent. I am not dependent. I should be, you know what I mean? And so, but it's been really fascinating to realize the different, like, because I really never studied codependency and what that was. And so really that book has actually been surprisingly fascinating, that even like in forms of caretaking is a codependency. And it's like being, expectation on the outcome or for somebody to do something. So that's actually been a really surprising book that when they originally assigned it, I was like, oh, this is going to be boring. You know what I mean? And then like
someone else needs that book. I don't need it.
Yeah. But then even learning like high functioning codependency, it's been really, really fascinating to really learn that. And it's just another facet where I said, the Lord just brings other ways for us to be more aware. And so while in what I felt like the traditional sense of codependency is there's still other facets of that I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I do have, so you know what I mean? And so there are these little nuances that the more you continue to know, it's like, it just continues to allow you to, see the things maybe in life that's bringing you some friction that you don't know why.
Okay. And then your favorite Bible verse, I believe it was from the book of Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew 6:21, where your heart is, your treasure is also. So for me, obviously my company I started is Heart of Generosity. It seems like for me, everything goes back to the heart. It's like where our heart's at. And, when our hearts are flourishing and ignited, I think that really allows it. And so for me, that is always just a reminder, because when we start to put our treasures elsewhere, it's usually where our hearts start to wander. And so just being remembering of like, where are we where is our heart truly treasuring?
That's a great website, heartofgenerosity.com, and great name of a business. Okay. And the final question, the bargain.
Man, I mean, I feel like I'm always in the bargain. Like, for me, it's like the hunt. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like,
totally.
That's probably where I have to watch myself. Like, oh, it's on sale. I'm like, I don't need 12
Do
more
I need
of those.
this? Right.
But honestly, for me, I actually find great bargains on eBay. Like, especially like there's like this, like just recently, I have these really favorite pair of pink heels, but I've worn them out. And so I actually found a pair on eBay that like someone wore once.
So great.
And I was like, yes.
Right.
I was like,
yes.
Yeah, so
that's
I actually
awesome.
will find some great deals on eBay.
I read about this famous clothing designer, his daughter. She does all of her clothing shopping on eBay. And all she does is she puts in the high level designers she looks for, and sets like the alerts and gets those. And she goes, that's the only way I do my shopping. So it's great.
And it's great because even like there was this favorite shirt that was like, I actually found it at Costco. It was like a Banana Republic V-neck shirt that was like my favorite shirt. And then I was like, but they're not selling them anymore, and then all of a sudden I found another one brand new on eBay. I was like, got two,
So great. So fun. Well, this has been such a treat. I think you're just a wealth of wisdom, and so grateful for you taking the time to share with our guests, and just God bless you in your practice and, your health journey as it continues, and the nonprofit that you lead, all the things. And also I should make a shout out. You mentioned, Gospel Patrons and as one of your favorite books, but there is also the book, The 31 Gospel Patrons. And this is by John Reinhart and his organization, Gospel Patrons, that you all can look up. But Christina is one of those people featured in that book, one of the 31 special people. And they're coming out with an audio version of the book where she actually reads her chapter about herself in her voice. So you might want to get that as well in this year of 2025. So God bless you. And thanks again, Christina, so much. Really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Kim. It was an absolute honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.